Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ontario Soccer's latest podcast. My name is Rebecca, and I'll be your host for today. In preparation for the 2024 Ontario Soccer Summit, our team is proud to be bringing you a small series of podcast episodes that are going to help you get to know our keynote speakers just a little bit better before this year's event. Today, we're speaking to Nick Levett, who is kicking us off on Saturday morning with his presentation on development around the game, which will be followed by a panel discussion on long-term player development 2.0. We're really excited to speak with Nick today. He has a very fascinating background in soccer and sports in general, and we have a lot to learn from him when it comes to development and the future of the game. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the interview. Thank you for joining us today, Nick Levett. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Where are you dialing in from today?
I am in southeast England, so I'm about 30 minutes from the south coast and about 30 minutes from London, so kind of in that little pocket of countryside south of the capital.
All right, let's get into the episode because you have a really interesting background in soccer. I kind of want to get like your whole story as much as I can. So would you mind just giving us like a brief overview of, I guess, who you are and how you ended up doing what you're doing today?
A brief version. Okay. So who am I? I'm a dad, a husband, a coach. I'm probably quite good on a road trip if the music is 90s hip hop and R&B. I'm a bang average cook. I'd probably like to be a park ranger in South Africa if I had the choice. That's probably who I am. But I've worked in sport for 25 years. Coached since I was 18. So yeah, oh blimey, almost 30 years of coaching. That's quite scary. And still learning and trying to work out how to do it better. And I've been fortunate to have some pretty cool experiences going around the world talking about sport and coaching and human performance and people development in lots of different spaces, from working with the English Football Association for 17 years. So working as kind of in charge of youth football. So everything kind of 5 to 21 in this country, and changing the player pathways and the structures and stuff there. That was pretty good fun. Managed national coaching programs with 90 odd full-time staff. That was quite cool. Talent ID with the England national teams. That was quite good fun. And then worked for 5 years across the Olympic pathway, working with lots of different sports, getting into some cool environments. I'm now doing just human performance development stuff with lots and lots of different people. So yeah, there's the short version for you. In amongst coaching and at every level, from Premier League clubs to international to all sorts. So
okay, so let's take like a deeper dive, I guess, into some of those things you just shared with us, starting with your time at the English FA. So did you say it was 17 years you spent with them?
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, that is a long time. Can you, like, what was that experience like for you? Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I did a number of different roles, from working at a county all the way through to kind of national roles. And I used to count my years at the FA by the amount of different England managers we had and the different chairman and chief execs, because I managed to see kind of lots of people in that revolving door that was their office. But it was lots of cool projects, from working with schools and clubs at local levels to try and change how we did things, and ultimately make the game more player-centered for young people. Try and change some of what we did as adults that probably wasn't quite right for children. And yeah, really kind of spent a lot of time looking at 5 to 11s and managing national coaching programs with them. But working through to, spending time doing talent ID with England under 15s through to the senior team, embedding ways of working, elite behavior frameworks, a new approach to scouting, development of coaching courses, and talent ID education. So yeah, lots of stuff. But I also kind of then did bits around the world where I got sent out in some kind of like missionary type role to support different people around the world in coaching things. So yeah, it was quite good fun.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. I know that one of like your greatest accomplishments during your time with the English FA was, like you said, you helped implement a new player pathway,
Mm.
which is obviously something that you're very passionate about, long-term player development. So can you like tell us, I guess, what was it that exactly needed change about the system? And how did you go about changing it?
Well, what needed changing was the stories that we were hearing from young people. And I would go out and I spoke to about 200 groups of kids to get feedback about what they thought about the system. And a lot of it was the size of the pitches, the size of the goals, because we would put little kids on full-size pitches and like it didn't really make sense. And where I used to coach at Premier League Club Academy, on my drive there, I used to go past a pitch and it was an adult pitch, full-size pitch. And on my way there would be a kids game on in the morning. And I stopped off to watch this kids game. And this was a group of 10-year-old kids. And I watched 6 corners and none of them got into the penalty box because the kids couldn't kick it that far. And then there was a centre forward that was through on goal against the goalie, and the coach stood on the side and he said, "Make yourself big." So you had this like tiny little kid in this massive goal. Like he couldn't make himself big. It was ludicrous. And then on my way home from coaching, I'd go past the same pitch and there'd be an adult game on the same pitch. And none of it made any sense. So I'd speak to children of that kind of 10, 11, 12 age group and say, "What do you think?" And kids would say things like, "Why have I got to be in goal that's so big that the adults use a step ladder to get the nets down?" And you've got visions of adults standing up on a ladder to try and put the nets up and get them down. And then we put a tiny little kid in there and say, "Okay, well, you've got to try and stop the ball going in there." And none of it made any sense. So we got a lot of feedback from young people. And we probably started a 3-year consultation program around the country to start to change. So we used to have 7v7 up to under 10s, and then it went to 11v11. And we brought in a whole new pathway where it went 5v5, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11. And we changed all the pitches, all the goals, all the way through. But yeah, it was a huge national campaign because ultimately it was going to affect, not far from 55,000 teams, 1 million kids. It was going to be a big impact on what they could do. So if it made the game better for young people, ultimately that's probably the reason why we should do most stuff.
How was, I guess, these changes and like this overhaul really of the game, how was that received by the masses or like the FA itself? Was there any like trouble kind of implementing these changes, or were people on board?
I think whenever you ask humans to change, you often feel a piece of resistance, especially, and not that we did, but if you put something across to say that's not very good, you're doing it wrong, you often create tension. And I think probably 95% of the people that we came across were absolutely on board. That makes sense. We can see why we need to go to a different approach to competition and youth football. You always got the odd person who you'd hear ludicrous things like, "Wow, 11v11 never hurt me," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you're like 70 years old and the lives of young people are a bit different now. Things have moved on." And so you got the odd bit of resistance. And I remember a guy in Newcastle at a league meeting saying, I don't care what you say about 9v9, I've got a baseball bat in my car ready for you."
Oh.
And I'd heard opposition like this before, and you just kind of laugh it off and work through it. But thankfully, he was the minority. but it's a little bit, I think like I said, when you go through kind of periods of human change, it's a little bit like the bereavement curve. You kind of go through that period of kind of anger and denial before you kind of get to acceptance and moving on. And that's ultimately the journey that we had to take people on. But we had to say to them, look, here's what the kids are saying about their experience. And I'll go to places, and I went to one league, and the league chairman, who didn't like the ideas, mainly because he didn't like people telling him what to do. That was what it was. It was nothing to do with the ideas, but he didn't like people telling him what to do, let alone somebody from the South. Um, uh, and he said, well, you haven't spoken to our kids. And I said, look, I've spoken to 200 groups of kids across. Yeah, but you've not spoken to our kids. They don't think this. I'm like, they've not got two heads and three arms. Like they're no different. So the next time I went up to his league meeting, I spent the day in schools speaking to kids that played in his league. So when he stood up and said, yeah, but our kids don't think that, I was able to then say, it's funny you should say that, because I've spoken to Alex from St. Martin's FC, and he said this, they play in your league, right? And like, he just kind of got a little bit lower and lower in his chair until he realized that this was more about him than anything else. So small pockets of opposition, but it's change, and people can be funny with change, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Mm.
Speaking of change, let's flash forward to your next position. After you left the English FA, you head over to UK coaching,
Mm.
where you started as the head of talent and performance and then moved your way into the head of coaching role. So let's talk about your time at UK coaching. Obviously, your background was mostly in soccer, and then you go to this organization, and now you're working with a variety of sports. How did that experience, I guess, alter or change your opinions when it comes to coaching and like your coaching techniques?
I think I'd always, and certainly more towards the end of my kind of FA career, I'd always been really curious to go out to different environments, to see what they do, to see what I could learn from other places. And I would go to lots of different places, non-sport as well, to see what I could learn. Like, I spent time at Google and Red Bull and with the military, and going into lots of different places, because ultimately it was all about talent development, talent performance, high performance, depending on what we were looking at the time. So going into the Olympics world was just kind of continued a little bit more of that ethos for me. And I would urge anybody that just coaches one sport to get out of their little silo and go and spend some time in different sports, because you just learn so much about different things, about different environments, about how people work in different ways. And I've been with an elite cricket coach this week. And one of the things that he's a bowling coach. And one of the things that we've been talking about is, what can he learn and what other sports does he need to go to learn things? So how does he go and see a triple jump coach? Or how does he go and see a baseball coach? So different sports that have got similar type of things to them. But for me, that was just how I've always been, was I'm just really curious to go out into some different places. And I don't know if it changed my approach to coaching. I think it probably consolidated some of my approach to coaching. But I think that's just kind of naturally evolved over the years, as I read more, as I learn more, as I make more mistakes and try different stuff. I think that probably just naturally evolves anyway.
Now let's talk about your current work that you're doing. I know that you are the director of Rivers of Thinking, and I believe that you started this organization, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Okay, so Rivers of Thinking is all about maximizing people's potential in sports and business.
Yeah.
What inspired you to start this organization?
Well, it was really interesting. So I finished off the season last year at a Premier League club as head of coaching, and I was keen. I've spent 25 years of my working life working in sport, and I've always kind of gone into some different business corporate spaces anyway. And it was just the opportunity to explore a little bit more about that, about what can I do and take from my experiences in high performance sport and then apply them in different domains. So I'm doing lots of, some of the projects I get involved in now are brilliant. And I'm able to say, I don't want to do that because that doesn't sound fun, or that sounds cool, right? Let's get into stuff and do that. So, for example, last week I spent 2 days with a national bingo company here that have got 56 sites around the country, and I was with some of their senior leaders looking at how we maximize and develop their individual performance and develop their team approach to then influence their business. The 2 days after that, I was delivering a coaching course, a soccer coaching course to 24 coaches, like half of here. And I'm doing some stuff with a law business company and a oil and gas recruitment company, as well as doing some grassroots projects in India. And in 3 weeks, I'm in Vancouver. So I'm able to kind of pick and choose just projects that I think, yeah, these are cool. But what I do is take the lessons from high performance sport and look at how we can apply those in the corporate sector. And it always comes down to, how do you maximize your own individual performance? How do you work better with others to allow you to do the stuff that you need to do? Now, in coaching, that's making sure that you can maintain impact, work with other people really well to enable your practice design, your X's and the O's bit, to have an impact on the people that you're trying to help get better at football. It's no different across different sectors for me. It's just human performance. And I'm able to do some really cool stuff. So yeah, working globally on those kind of projects. So it's good fun.
This might be hard, but if you had to pick one like quick tip that you can give our listeners that maybe feel like they're not reaching their full potential, or just feel like maybe they want to take their career or their sport or anything to the next level, what's like your go-to piece of advice for people to maybe like step it up and reach that full potential?
Coaching or non-coaching?
Oh gosh, let's do non-coaching.
So non-coaching, I think the big thing for me would be, how do you recognize your strengths, but know when you overplay those and it starts to become a weakness, or when you need to step into a different space in order to maintain impact. So, for example, if I'm driven around fairness and values and empathy and making sure everybody's okay and looking after other people and being very kind and thoughtful towards others, that's a real strength. If you overplay that, you end up in this kind of place of can't say no, and you start doing everything for other people, and you end up kind of weighing yourself down. But also you have to be able to step into a different space where sometimes you might need to be a little bit more direct or forceful and be a bit bolder or braver and think about getting some task stuff done. But it's knowing what the situation you're in needs and how you flex your behaviors to step into some different spaces. That's, I think, how we kind of maximize human impact.
Okay, lastly, I want to talk about your relationship really to Ontario soccer. I wasn't here 10 years ago, but I heard that 10 years ago you joined us for the Ontario Soccer Coaching Conference. And at that point, you talked about long-term player development, and now you're returning in 2024 to talk some more about development. So how do you think, or how have you observed, I guess, the landscape change in that time, like over the last 10 years? What's changed in the world of development?
Well, John Herdman has gone from the women's coach to the men's coach. That's changed. So John presented at that conference with me at that time. Rock star John. So there's lots of changes. I think I would like to have seen faster change is probably what I would like to have seen. And I think we've probably seen a bit of a swing from coach-centered, the coach decides everything. I think we've seen a bit of a shift into player-centered, where coaches are now thinking about the needs of the athletes that they're working with in different ways. But for me now, I think the conversation needs to shift back into a space of being co-created. So how do we co-create experiences with other people? And it's probably one of the things that I'll start to talk about when I'm there, because I don't think we often swing to either end. And I don't think it's about that. I think it's about working with people to develop things that we do together. So, for example, I see a lot of people have one-to-ones at work with their boss. Well, like a one-to-one with your boss implies that the boss is going to talk at someone. So just change it and just have a conversation. Like, so get rid of one-to-ones, just have conversations with people. And I think the more that you can kind of co-create and show that you're on the same team ultimately makes a difference. So yeah, that kind of, I've definitely seen a shift towards being more player-centered. I hope there's been less shouting at kids, although I can't confirm that. But I'm intrigued to see that next shift now into a bit more of a co-created space.
Can you give us, I guess, like a little bit more of a sneak peek into what your presentation is going to be about without giving too much away?
I can tell you that the presentation slides will probably mostly be pictures of animals.
Okay. I love that.
There you go.
That's
I'm
all we get. Okay. That's gonna leave
not giving
people
you any more than that.
wondering. Okay, I'll take it. And yeah, I'm intrigued, and I'm sure other people will be.
No, it's good. Ultimately, it's about how do we make sure we continue to be nice to kids, but we help them learn and grow as young people. We just use soccer as the vehicle to do that. That's all it does, and it's about finding joy, I think, in a playful way. So that's the plan. Finding joy, which will probably start with a dog with a tennis ball in their mouth, because that's what the dog has done to find joy. And I think we should focus on finding joy.
All right. I love that. Well, thank you for that little sneak peek and for this whole conversation. I'm really looking forward to getting to meet you in person.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you for your time. And I guess until then.
I'll see you next month.
Once again, that was Nick Levett, who will be kicking us off Saturday morning at the 2024 Ontario Soccer Summit with his keynote presentation. If you want to keep up with Nick between now and then, you can find him on Twitter at nlevitt or go to his website, riversofthinking.com. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I can't wait to see everybody at the 2024 Ontario Soccer Summit. If you're still trying to decide whether or not you'll be joining us, all of the information you need to make your decision is at ontariosoccer.net/soccer-summit. Once again, that is ontariosoccer.net/soccer-summit. The link is also in the description for this episode. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.